Imagine a hero who risks everything to save a life, only to lose what he values most, his freedom to walk. Daniel Romero, a dedicated firefighter, finds in fire not only tragedy, but also a new beginning. Isabella Vega, a millionaire heiress, is rescued by him and feels she must give back in a way the world would never expect. But what if the biggest challenge isn't physical recovery? An ex-love emerges to mess up the present, and Daniel and Isabella's emotional journey reveals that the biggest fires are not in the flames, but within us. A surprising ending that redefines strength, love, and courage. Don't blink, this story will leave a deep impression on you. Sirens echoed through the night as Daniel Romero held tight to the communications radio, his steady voice rising above the chaos. "Team, we have people trapped on the 3rd floor. Fast and coordinated, let's go!" he ordered, jumping out of the truck and pulling on the oxygen mask. Flames engulfed the factory facade, lighting the Venice Beach sky in shades of orange and grey. Daniel entered the building with his colleagues, avoiding collapsed beams. The heat was unbearable, and the smoke spread like a thick blanket, making it difficult to see. In the midst of the deafening noise, he heard a scream. "Help! Someone, please!" The female voice trembled, muffled by the explosions. Daniel followed the sound, crossing burning corridors until he reached the 3rd floor. There, he saw Isabella Vega, crouched in a corner, holding a handkerchief to her face and trying to breathe. "I am here," he shouted. "Don't move! I'm going to get you out of here!" Isabella looked at him, her eyes wide with terror. Daniel reached out and pulled her up, holding her steady. "Trust in me. Don't let go of my hand." His voice was strong but reassuring. She nodded frantically as he led her through the wreckage. However, an explosion surprised them. A piece of the structure collapsed, blocking the path. Daniel, without hesitation, pushed Isabella to a safe area and tried to remove the debris with his hands. "Everything will be fine. Stay calm," he assured, while signaling to his team. Isabella coughed, her body shaking with exhaustion. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me," she asked, her voice weak. Daniel replied without looking at her, concentrating on his work. "Because that's what I do, and I'm going to get you out of here, whatever the cost." With the help of 2 firefighters, he managed to open the way and carried Isabella in his arms to the exit. As soon as they reached the open air, she collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily. Daniel gently placed her on the ground as the medical team approached, but he didn't have time to celebrate. As he tried to retreat, a beam gave way, hitting him in the back and knocking him to the ground. Pain exploded through his spine, and everything went black. At the hospital, Daniel slowly opened his eyes. His body felt heavy, unable to move like before. The doctor entered the room, bringing bad news. "Daniel, we did what we could. The injury to your spine is serious. We will need more tests, but the mobility of your legs has been compromised." He didn't respond. He just stared at the ceiling, letting reality hit him like a new wave of fire. The doctor's words echoed in his mind, mixing with Isabella's memory. Saving one life had cost him his own. Daniel was in the hospital room, staring at the window. The voices in the hallway came as distant murmurs, muffled by his own frustration. He felt a lump in his throat, the reality still too heavy to digest. The door slowly opened, and Isabella entered with a bouquet of flowers in her hands. He recognized her immediately. His eyes were full of gratitude, but Daniel looked away, avoiding any contact. "You must be Daniel Romero," Isabella began, trying to sound confident. "I'm Isabella Vega. I wanted to thank you for saving me." Daniel laughed bitterly without looking at her. "To thank? For what? Because I'm stuck here while you go back to your perfect life?" He shook his head. "I think it's in the wrong place." Isabella took a step forward, ignoring the cold tone. He placed the flowers on the table next to the bed and sat down in the nearby chair. My life is far from perfect, and I didn't come here out of obligation. I came because I feel like I owe you something." His voice carried sincerity. He finally looked at her, his eyes filled with pain and anger. "You owe me nothing. I was doing my job, save lives. I just didn't expect to lose mine in the process." Isabella hesitated, but refused to give up. He pulled out a nearby chair. "I know this won't change what happened, but I want to help you." She held his gaze, even with the tension in the air. No one should face this alone. Daniel sighed, releasing the weight on his chest. "Do you really think you can help? I don't even know how I'm going to start living like this." He gestured to his legs, covered by the sheet. Isabella took a deep breath, feeling the gravity of his words. "Maybe I don't know how to help you right now, but I know that giving up is not the way. You risked everything to save my life. I promise, Daniel, that I will be here for you, no matter what." He didn't respond immediately, but something about the firmness of her voice touched him. It was rare to find people who spoke with such determination, especially when they had no obligation to do so. Promises are easy to make, difficult to comply with. He murmured, looking at her skeptically. "Then give me a chance to prove it." Isabella smiled slightly. "You saved my life. Now let me help save yours." For a moment the room was silent. Daniel, although reluctant, felt that something in Isabella's sincerity was real. He nodded, without saying anything else. Days have passed since Isabella's visit. Daniel was beginning to accept his new reality, but her presence remained in his mind. He couldn't explain why, but there was something in his determination that made him think that maybe he wasn't as alone as he thought. However, his tranquility was interrupted when Clara Mendez, his ex-fiancée, appeared in the room. "Daniel," Clara began, hesitating at the door. His eyes were filled with a mix of guilt and anxiety. "I didn't know if I should come. I didn't know if you wanted to see me." He stood still, surprised by the visit. After a long silence, he replied coldly, "Why are you here, Clara? I didn't think it was part of your life plan to deal with someone broken." She swallowed, clearly struck by the words. He approached slowly, stopping next to the bed. "Don't say that. I care about you. I always worried." Clara sat down, touching his hand gently. "I did everything wrong before. I shouldn't have left. But I'm here now." Daniel pulled his hand away. "You left when I needed you most." "What has changed now? Was it guilt that brought you back?" Clara opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, the door opened again. Isabella entered, carrying a bag with books and a smile that disappeared when she noticed Clara's presence. "Oh, sorry. I didn't know it was busy." Isabella stopped at the door, uncomfortable. Clara turned to her, her expression immediately closing. "Who are you?" he asked with a tone that Daniel recognized as territorial. "I'm a friend," Isabella replied, trying to maintain her composure. "I just came to bring some things for Daniel." "Friend?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "Interesting." "Clara, that's enough." Daniel interrupted, his voice firmer. He looked at Isabella. "You can come in. I want it to stay." Clara stood up, clearly irritated. "Looks like you already have enough company. Maybe I should go." Daniel didn't stop her, just watched as she left, slamming the door. Isabella approached hesitantly, placing the books on the table. "Sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you," she said, lowering her gaze. "You didn't get in the way," Daniel replied, letting out a sigh. "Actually, it was good of you to show up." She looked at him, curious. "He was?" "Yes." He nodded. "Because it reminded me that some people really are here because they want to be." Isabella smiled, and the room for a moment seemed less heavy. Daniel looked at the calendar on the hospital wall, mentally marking the days left until surgery. He had decided to take a chance, even if the outcome was uncertain. While he was thinking, The doctor entered the room. "Ready for the big day?" asked the doctor, leafing through the chart. "More or less," Daniel replied, trying to hide the tension. "I just need to know if I have any chance of recovering what I lost." The doctor adjusted his glasses, his expression neutral. "Surgery has its risks, but if there is partial success, it could be a big step forward." Daniel nodded, convinced that he couldn't stand by and wait for things to improve on their own. "Let's go ahead," he said. I don't want Isabella to know about this now." The doctor frowned. "He is sure. She seems like a great support to you." "I am sure," Daniel replied. "I don't want her to worry." Later, Isabella appeared in the room with her usual smile and a bag of food. But something was different. She noticed the tension in the air. "Everything okay, Daniel? You seem distant," she asked, placing the bag on the table. "I am fine," he responded quickly, looking away. "Just thinking about the next steps." Isabella frowned, but didn't insist. They chatted about trivialities until she said goodbye. As soon as he left, Daniel sighed, feeling the weight of the lie. On the morning of the surgery, Isabella arrived at the hospital by surprise. When he entered the room, he found the bed empty. Her heart raced and she ran to the front desk. "Where is Daniel Romero?" he asked, panting. The nurse hesitated before answering. "He's in the operating room. The doctor has already started the procedure." Isabella felt her legs weaken. Without wasting time, she went to the waiting room of the surgical ward and remained there, restless. When the doctor left hours later, she ran to him. "How is he?" he asked, almost out of breath. "The surgery was a partial success. He will need a lot of physical therapy, but we were able to restore some mobility," the doctor replied, reassuring her. When Daniel was taken back to the room, still groggy from the anesthesia, he saw Isabella sitting next to him. "You found out, didn't you?" he murmured, his voice weak. "I found out," she replied, holding his hand, "and I'm here. I always will be." Weeks later, during one of the physiotherapy sessions, Daniel took his first steps. It was painful and difficult, but he did it. Isabella was next to him, applauding with her eyes full of tears. "You did it, Daniel," she said, excited. He looked at her, smiling for the first time in a long time. "Not alone. You were with me." However, on the same day Clara appeared at the hospital, she found out about Daniel's recovery and wasted no time. "Daniel, I knew you would be strong again. Now we can start over," Clara said, approaching. But Daniel didn't hesitate. "Clara, no," he replied firmly. "My future is not with you. He's with Isabella." Clara swallowed, defeated, and left without looking back. Isabella, who was watching everything, held Daniel's hand. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. He smiled at her. More than ever. The sun was beginning to set on Venice Beach, dyeing the sky with shades of orange and pink. Daniel adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, his expression a mix of nervousness and happiness. He still used a cane to get around, but every step was a victory. He looked at the door when he heard a soft knock. "Are you ready?" Isabella asked, entering with a soft smile. She wore a blue dress that highlighted her eyes, and Daniel held his breath for a moment. "Almost," he replied, turning to face her. "You look incredible." She smiled, but there was something deeper in her eyes. "Today is a big day for you. Are you nervous?" "Maybe a little," Daniel admitted, looking at the cane in his hand. "But you're here, and that makes all the difference." They walked together to the hall where the event would be held. Friends, family, and fellow firefighters were gathered to celebrate Daniel's journey. When he entered, a round of applause filled the place. He paused, emotional, before taking the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice firm but full of emotion. "I want to thank every person here for being by my side these last few months. They were the most difficult moments of my life, but also the most transformative." He looked at Isabella, who was among the crowd, and continued. I learned that strength doesn't just come from the body. It comes from people who believe in you, even when you don't. And for that, I need to especially thank someone. Daniel got down from the small stage and approached Isabella. He held her hands and, kneeling down with difficulty, took a small box from his pocket. Isabella Vega, you came into my life when everything seemed lost. You believed in me, gave me courage, and showed me that love is more powerful than any obstacle. He opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful ring. Will you accept spending the rest of your life with me? Isabella put her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The entire room fell silent as she nodded. Yes, Daniel. That's all I want most. The applause was deafening as Daniel lifted her up for a hug. At the back of the room, the firefighters looked at each other and began shouting in chorus, "Speech! Speech!" Isabella took the microphone, laughing but still emotional. I don't know if I can give a speech, but I can say one thing. Daniel is not just a hero for what he did that night. He is a hero for never giving up, even when everything seemed lost. And now, let's build a life together, because together we are stronger. The night ended with laughter, dancing, and a promise for the future. As the room emptied, Daniel and Isabella walked to the beach, where the sound of the waves seemed to bless their journey. What next? Isabella asked, looking at him. Daniel smiled, shaking your hand. Let's face everything together.